Okay, I want you to picture something for me. You're in the middle of a city.
Uh-huh.
It's, say, 5:30 on a Tuesday. There's a jackhammer going off. A car is honking. Your phone is buzzing in your pocket.
Oh, I know this feeling.
Right. It's that wall of aggressive information just coming at you from every single angle.
I can feel my stress levels rising just thinking about it. That's just modern life, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
Now, what if you had a button? You press it, and poof, you're instantly in a sound oasis.
A sound oasis.
Yeah. The traffic is gone. The jackhammer disappears. Your phone stops buzzing. You're just floating in this spacious, unhurried, totally non-aggressive soundscape.
That sounds like a superpower I would pay a lot of money for, but I think I know where this is headed.
We are absolutely going there. Today, we're doing a deep dive into the music that was, well, it was basically engineered to be that escape button. We were talking about New Age music.
And before you roll your eyes, because I know some of you are probably thinking of incense and wind chimes, we're looking at a really great column from MMR. It was published in August 2025.
Right, New Age music, the intersection of meditation and soundscapes. And we've also got some artist archives from Monumental Movement Records.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, before I read this, my idea of New Age was pretty stereotypical.
Let me guess. Crystal shops? Massage parlors?
Exactly. Or just that generic, synth music that's playing while you're trying to relax, but are actually just thinking about your to-do list.
You're not alone in that.
Sure.
For a long, long time, the genre was kind of branded as elevator music or, something for the woo-woo crowd.
But that's not the whole story.
Not even close. The reality is so much more interesting. We're going to uncover its roots in, of all things, avant-garde rock, a kind of counterculture rebellion, and a philosophy that is honestly more relevant today in 2026 than it was when it all started.
So that's our mission for this deep dive, to unpack the history, the philosophy, and this huge modern comeback it's having. Because it seems like in our age of total information overload, this non-aggressive music is almost a survival tool.
It really is.
So, okay, let's strip away the stereotypes. What is New Age music, really?
It's a bit tricky to define, because it's such a chameleon. But the source material really places its origins in the late 70s and early 80s, mostly in the West.
And it's a mix of things.
A huge mix. Think of it sitting at this four-way intersection between ambient music, contemporary classical, what they used to call ethnic or world music,
Okay.
and even environmental sounds like recordings of a forest or the ocean.
So if I'm, scrolling through a playlist, what are the telltale signs? How do I know, okay, this is New Age?
There are a few key characteristics. First, the melody is almost always very simple. You're not going to hear some chaotic jazz solo or a big, catchy pop hook.
Right.
Second, and this is a big one, is the use of drones.
Drones. Not the flying kind, I assume.
No. Musical drones. It's like a long, sustained note that just hums underneath everything. It creates this sense of endless space.
And it's repetitive.
Yeah.
I see that here. Now, repetitive can sound boring.
In pop music, sure. But here, that's the whole point. It's hypnotic. It's meant to help your analytical brain just switch off for a bit.
That makes sense.
But the single biggest thing, the thing that really defines it, is the rhythm. Or I should say, the lack of one.
The whole non-aggressive thing.
Exactly. Think about most Western music. Rock, pop, whatever. The beat is what drives you. It grabs your attention. It makes you want to move.
Sure.
New Age music often just gets rid of the beat entirely, or it's very, very loose. It's not trying to make you tap your foot. It's trying to literally lower your heart rate.
The sources call it healing music. Is that just a marketing term?
I think it's more functional than that. The text describes it as creating a soundscape, something for you to exist inside of.
I like that, a soundscape.
Yeah. And whether they're using synthesizers or acoustic instruments like a flute or a piano, the goal is always tied to meditation, relaxation. It's music that isn't demanding anything from you. It's just there to support you.
Music that doesn't make demands. I love that. But this is the part that really got me. You'd think this gentle, floating music came from, I don't know, monks or something.
Right.
But the roots, they're in rock music. How does that work?
It sounds totally backwards, I know. But if you go back to the 70s, it all grew out of the counterculture movement.
Okay.
You had this huge cultural shift towards Eastern philosophy, meditation, getting back to nature. But the musicians making the soundtrack for that, a lot of them were coming out of the experimental rock scene, specifically a genre called krautrock.
Krautrock. I mean, that sounds about as aggressive as it gets.
It's a really unfortunate name for a brilliant movement. We're talking about the German experimental scene, bands like Tangerine Dream or Popol Vuh.
I've heard of Tangerine Dream.
So they were using these enormous early synthesizers to make these long, sprawling electronic soundscapes. They were taking the energy of rock, but ditching the verse-chorus-verse structure for these, like, atmospheric journeys.
So they were exploring inner space instead of just trying to write a hit song.
That's a perfect way to put it. And that brings us to, I guess you could call him the godfather of all this.
Brian Eno.
You have to talk about Brian Eno. The source points to his album, Ambient 1. Music for Airports as this huge turning point.
I've actually heard that one. It's surprisingly beautiful.
It is, and Eno had this great idea behind it. He said ambient music has to be as ignorable as it is interesting.
Ignorable as it is interesting. That's a tough line to walk for an artist.
A really fine line. But that philosophy basically built the bridge from experimental rock to what would become New Age. It framed the music as a designed environment.
Speaking of rock origins, the artist profiles had a story that blew my mind. Kitaro.
Yeah.
I always just picture him as this kind of wise master with the long hair surrounded by keyboards. But he started in a prog rock band?
He did. Early 70s, a Japanese progressive rock band called the Far East Family Band.
Wow.
Yeah, he wasn't meditating in a temple. He was a keyboardist in a band that was basically trying to be Japan's answer to Pink Floyd.
So what happened? How do you go from Japanese Pink Floyd to, the face of New Age music?
It was a chance meeting. The profile says that while his band was in Europe, he met Klaus Schulze.
The German synth guy from the krautrock scene.
The very same. Schulze was producing their record, and he showed Kitaro what the synthesizer could really do, not just as an instrument for solos, but as a tool for creating entire worlds of sound. Kitaro was so blown away, he basically quit the band format on the spot.
That's a huge leap of faith. To just leave your band and say, I'm just going to make noises on this machine now.
A massive risk,
Yeah.
But it obviously paid off. That pivot is what created the sound that made him a global star.
And global star is the right term. Because when we hit the 1980s, this wasn't an underground thing anymore. It became a full-blown industry.
The golden era. This is when New Age went from just being a vibe to, a section in the record store with its own little divider card.
Right.
You had labels like Windham Hill Records, and they were brilliant at marketing. They sold an entire aesthetic. You bought a Windham Hill record. You knew you were getting a beautiful photo of a tree or a mountain on the cover.
High-quality pressing.
Exactly. And a very specific, calming mood. It was branding genius.
And looking at the artist list from the MMR column, the variety in the 80s and 90s is actually kind of wild. It wasn't all just synths.
Not at all. That's a big misconception. I mean, take George Winston.
The piano guy.
The piano guy. The source talks about his album, December. It's just solo piano. It's quiet. It's seasonal. He called it rural folk piano.
Right.
But it fits under the New Age umbrella because of its function.
It's contemplative.
Right. It creates a quiet little winter scene in your living room.
And then on the total opposite end, you've got a guy playing an electric harp.
Andreas Vollenweider.
Yes. I mean, who decides they're going to be a global superstar playing an electric harp?
He did, and it worked. His music was so fantastical and dreamlike, very rhythmic. It was weird and colorful, and people loved it. It proved that New Age could be huge and fantastical, not just minimal.
Then the 90s arrived and things got, well, a little sexy. We have to talk about Enigma.
You really do. You could not escape Satanists, Part 1, in the early 90s.
It was on every radio station. This bizarre mix of, Gregorian monks chanting
Singing the Latin, yeah.
over a hip-hop beat
Yeah.
with French whispering.
It was a formula that should not have worked at all. Ancient sacred chants and modern synths. But it brought this mysterious, almost forbidden vibe to the pop charts. It made New Age feel kind of dangerous, which was a big change.
And at the same time, Enigma is doing that. You have Yanni basically turning it into a stadium spectacle.
Oh, Yanni brought the scale, the full orchestra, the flowing hair, the mustache.
Just shows at the Acropolis.
Exactly. He took this very introspective music and made it bombastic. He proved you could sell out arenas with it.
And all the while, Kitaro, who we mentioned, was also at his peak.
Absolutely. His soundtrack for the NHK Special Silk Road was legendary. It basically defined what the ancient East sounded like for a whole generation of people. He won a Golden Globe, a Grammy. I mean, by the 90s, the Grammys had a whole category for Best New Age Album.
It was fully mainstream.
Yeah.
But the sources also mention another Japanese artist, Fumio Miyashita, who seems to represent the other side of it, the more healing aspect.
Yes, Miyashita is so important for understanding the functional part. He was a music therapist from Nagano, and his albums, like Mizu, weren't about selling out stadiums. They were literally created for music therapy.
Okay.
And this happened at the same time as this huge healing boom in Japan during the CD era. People were buying this music as, a kind of medicine.
This brings us to the why of it all. It feels like this music was the soundtrack for a much bigger cultural idea.
Yeah.
Why were people in the, super consumer-driven 80s so into this?
The MMR column says you have to see it as a reaction. The 80s were all about rapid urbanization, skyscrapers, Wall Street.
Right.
And New Age music was the antidote to that. It was the anti-city music.
Harmony with nature.
Precisely. Even if the sound was coming out of a microchip, it was meant to evoke a forest or the ocean. It was tied into the environmental movement, the rise of yoga and holistic health.
Mm-hmm.
It was part of a whole lifestyle.
It's a little ironic, isn't it, using this super high-tech synthesizer to try and feel closer to nature?
That is the central paradox of the genre. But I guess thinking was that a synthesizer could create pure sounds that felt like wind or water, but without the cultural baggage of, say, a rock guitar.
But then the bubble kind of burst, didn't it? You hit the 2000s, and suddenly having a Yanni CD on your shelf wasn't cool anymore.
The dip, yeah, the source acknowledges that. In the 2000s, culture just shifted. It became more about irony and grit, and New Age got written off as cheesy, spiritual background music. It lost its credibility.
Yeah. And I think that's when my crystal shop bias really took hold. But this is the amazing part. We're talking about it now, in 2026. And the article is arguing there's a huge comeback happening.
It's not just an argument. You can see it happening. And you have to ask, why now? Why are we all suddenly digging up this 40-year-old synth music?
I think it's simple. Information overload.
That's a huge piece of it, for sure. But the technology of how we listen has also changed everything. I mean, think about those lo-fi beats to study to playlists on YouTube.
We have millions and millions of listeners.
Right. They are the direct spiritual descendants of New Age. We've moved toward functional music, music for focus, music for sleep, music for anxiety. And New Age just fits perfectly into that modern chill-out culture.
It's almost like we stopped listening to music for the song itself and started listening for its utility.
That's a great way of putting it. And there's also the physical side of it, the analog return. People are digging up obscure 80s cassettes and vinyl records.
There is something so nice about that.
Yeah.
In our world of perfectly clean digital files, hearing the little crackle on a record just feels real.
It does. And it's not just about nostalgia. You have new composers like Laraji or Caitlin Aurelia Smith who are taking those classic New Age tools and making them cool and credible again for a new audience.
And the source points to the wellness industry, which is, it's a multi-trillion-dollar beast at this point.
It's unavoidable. Mindfulness is completely mainstream now. You go to a yoga studio, you open a meditation app like Calm or Headspace.
And what do you hear?
You hear New Age soundscapes. It's become a standard tool for mental health.
So we basically come full circle. The music designed in the 70s to escape the noise of the city is now being used to help us survive the noise of the internet.
That's the sound oasis from the very beginning. It's an auditory safe room.
So to recap this whole journey, it's a wild one. It starts in the 70s counterculture with German experimental rock,
which explodes in the 80s into this massive market where guys like Yanni and Guitarro are winning Grammys and selling out stadiums.
Then it gets written off as elevator music for a while in the 2000s.
And now it has roared back as the official soundtrack for our modern age of anxiety, all powered by streaming playlists and our desperate need for a little quiet.
The MMR column ends by saying this isn't a fad. It suggests that as long as our world gets louder and more crowded, the need for this non-aggressive, introspective music is only going to grow. It's a culture that's quietly supporting our lives.
It's radical, really. In a world where everything is trying to grab your attention alerts, notifications, hooks, this is music that asks for absolutely nothing. It just gives you space.
So here's the thought I want to leave you with. Next time you find yourself reaching for your noise-canceling headphones, just mull this over. If this music was first designed to help people escape the physical noise of the 1980s, what does the fact that it's trending again tell us about the noise levels, digital and physical, of our lives today?
That really is the question.
Are we even listening for the melody anymore? Or are we just listening for the silence between the notes? Think about it. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
See you next time.